All right, our next talk, the second day this year, is a guy who flew from across the pond to share some information with you. He wrote a book that he talked about last year called Musical Truth, and he is one of these folks that has his eyes on the prize, so to speak. He knows what manipulation is out there. He's been in the industry, so to speak, and now he's moving on to an even more in-depth look at the big picture and the actors and benefactors involved. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mark Devlin.
Thanks, Bob. Morning, everyone. Feeling awake? I'm still on British time, so it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon for me, so it's a good time of day for me to start. This is my third Free Your Mind conference, so it's great to be back. And just before I dive into the presentation, I just want to start with a little bit of a caveat or a disclaimer. One of the things that truth researchers in this kind of arena of information have to put up with is the constant accusation that you are in some way a government agent or a shill or some kind of disinfo tool, you know? I get this all the time, and I'm sure many of the other speakers that you'll see this weekend have these same accusations leveled at them. It just seems to be an occupational hazard when you get involved in the truth research community. But I get something else on top of that, because there are a few morons out there that seem to think that my name, in some way, is an aspect of me putting the truth in plain sight and letting people know what I'm all about. Because I get into occult symbolism and predictive programming in music videos and stuff like that. And some people seem to think that my name, Mark Devlin, is supposed to be taken to mean Mark of the Devil. Believe it or not, these people actually exist. And so every now and again, I get a comment like this, which crops up on a YouTube thread or Facebook comments or something, where the guy says, your name is Mark Devlin, as in Mark of the Beast, and Devlin as in the devil. You're part of a psychological operation. The best way to control the opposition is to lead it ourselves. So just to put this thing to bed, my name came into the family through my dad being adopted. That's how we got the name Devlin. And when you trace it back to the original Gaelic, you get this rendering of it. So you have a B instead of the V, and it's nothing to do with the devil at all. And so I just wanted to put that out there, because some people seem to think that that's what I'm all about. I'm doing revelation of the method and giving people an opportunity to know. And if anyone wants to do some background research into me and prove that I'm a government agent, some kind of disinfo shill, or that I'm a Satanist that belongs to some kind of occult organization, you have my absolute blessing to do your very best, go digging, and good luck, because you'll be there for a long time. So that having been said, let's get into the main part of the presentation today. I'm going to be talking about lifetime actors, culture creation, and social engineering. And this is all information that has come across my radar in the course of the research for my 2 books. So Musical Truth Volume 1 has been out for about a year. I'm currently writing Musical Truth Volume 2. And it's become abundantly clear to me, it did a long while back, that this world is nothing like we're told it is by the mainstream media, by government institutions, and by other expressions of the establishment. We live in an illusory reality where the vast majority of people have had their whole belief systems and their values and their idea of morals and their perception of what's normal and what's sane dictated to them by various organizations which specialize in this kind of thing. That's social engineering. And it's summed up brilliantly in the opening page of the book Propaganda by Edward Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud, dubbed the father of PR, of spin, of propaganda, where he said, we are governed, our minds are moulded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we've never heard of. It's they who pull the wires which control the public mind, who harness old social forces and contrive new ways to bind and guide the world. This was written many, many decades ago. He lived to 104 years old, interestingly. But it remains as true today as the day it was written, because that's what social engineering is all about. And you have institutions which specialize in sowing these value systems into the minds of the general public and changing people's behaviors, changing their consciousness. And the way they get the job done is they use tried and trusted individuals as their operatives, as their foot soldiers. So they make sure that anyone who's in the public eye, anyone that has any kind of recognizable image, anyone who's a household name, anyone that the average Joe in the street has heard of, has been placed there in a role to do this kind of work in sowing these perceptions. So it doesn't matter whether it's politicians, whether it's Hollywood actors, whether it's musicians, television presenters, so-called cultural icons, business leaders. They would never leave it to chance as to who would rise to the very upper levels of these walks of life. It's all controlled. And this is where we get into the realm of lifetime actors. Lifetime actor is a phrase that was coined by the researcher and author of the book Caesar's Messiah, Joseph Atwill. And he's done a lot of great podcasts recently under the Unspun banner with Jan Irvin of Gnostic Media, where they really uncover, they really get into how social engineering and culture creation works. And they've uncovered the true backgrounds of so many people that have previously been thought of and revered as heroes of one form or another. There are no heroes. They're all placed there. A great example of a lifetime actor would be Barack Obama. And whatever anyone may think of him, I'm sure most would agree that he is a very polished performer. He's got his act down to a fine art. At least he is when the auto cue's working. When the auto cue breaks, it's a different matter. But how much do we really know about this guy? I mean, so the question still remains over his birth certificate, which has not been resolved satisfactorily. We still don't know for sure whether he was actually born in the United States. We don't know if he's really Barry Soetoro. And when it comes to the First Lady, we don't know if that should really be the First Lad. Because according to many researchers, and Joan Rivers, Michelle is actually Michael. It's a dude masquerading as Barack's wife. So it's more unanswered questions about this guy. How well do we really know him? And will we ever now really get an opportunity to understand his true nature, where he came from? Is he a clone of Akhenaten? You know, will we discover these things? Key to lifetime actors and where they come from and how they get there is genealogy, if I can say it correctly. Bloodlines, family links, where these people come from. Genealogists have uncovered the fact that Barack Obama is actually ancestrally linked to George W. Bush. Who would have believed this could be the case? And when you get into the family history and the ancestry of George W. Bush, you discover some really interesting things. So there's links here to Tom Hanks, the actor. There's links going back to Abraham Lincoln. Marilyn Monroe's in there. Camilla Parker Bowles. Vlad the Impaler. We'll be hearing more from him shortly. Diana, all sorts. Fascinating stuff when you get down to it. So we're conditioned to believe that when it comes to individuals that become US presidents, or individuals that get to run massive corporations, or individuals that become successful Hollywood actors or pop stars, all it's really down to is working really hard, making the right connections, crossing your fingers for a bit of good luck, and then hoping for the best. And you too could be the next president of the United States, or you too could be the next Johnny Depp or Tom Cruise. But of course it doesn't work like that, because presidents, actors, pop stars, TV presenters are selected and not elected. And so much of it comes down to where they come from in terms of bloodlines. Just staying with Bush, a common suggestion among researchers is that George W. Bush's grandmother, George Bush Sr.'s wife, Barbara, is actually an illegitimate daughter of the notorious occultist Aleister Crowley, who figures majorly in the backstory of the music industry. And looking at this, it wouldn't greatly surprise me. It does seem that there is a family resemblance there somewhere. And these people crop up in all kinds of walks of life, in all kinds of prominent positions, and then you discover the links between them all, and you realize that none of it is by accident, none of it is by chance, they're all placed there. So then we get reports of how Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie are actually linked genealogically, and that would be the reason why they ended up as a couple, because they were placed together. They were put into the public eye to have a controlling effect as part of the social engineering agenda. And then you find out that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton are involved in that whole mess as well. And what a farce this last election was, where people were led to believe that they were voting for two completely separate independent candidates that represented entirely different values. I know those of us in this room know better, but it seems the vast majority of people still fall for these same old tricks. And here we have an article from the Daily Mail in the UK. So for people that don't like independent media outlets, alternative media outlets, and they only like going to tried and tested official sources, then this one came from the UK Daily Mail, where they showed that Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are actually distant cousins. And they do the ancestry through the family tree to show how that's the case. So it's all an act. It's all illusion. It's all a dog and pony show. You know, they're all controlled, and it's all part of an ongoing agenda. All Muslims are a danger except the rich ones. Exactly. Ain't that the truth? And as the late, great George Carlin so astutely observed, it's a big club, and you and I ain't in it. And thank God for that, because who'd want to be? Here we are with some more genealogy linking Clinton and Trump. Must practice that word more. A few years ago, Prince Charles came out somewhat proudly and proclaimed that he discovered that he's descended from Vlad the Impaler, a.k.a. Dracula from Transylvania. I think if I discovered that about my ancestry, I'd want to top myself rather than shout from the rooftops about it. But Charles seemed to be quite chuffed that that's where he came from. And with this one, I might be reaching a little bit, and it's pure speculation, but I do see a bit of a family resemblance there as well. Jimmy Savile, Vlad the Impaler. Is it so hard to imagine? There's got to be a reason why Jimmy Savile was in the public eye so much for all those decades, and we'll get back to him. David Cameron, similar to Charles, came out in a UK newspaper a couple of years ago, revealing that he is linked ancestrally to Kim Kardashian. So for anyone that's ever wondered why Kim Kardashian is actually famous, because most people you speak to can't actually tell you what she does. Everyone's heard of her, but nobody knows what she does. Well, when you discover that she's from the same bloodline as David Cameron, and we have all the links going through the family tree here, suddenly it explains why she's all over TV and in the celebrity gossip mags, and why she's been put together with Kanye West. Because they emanate from these bloodlines that are put to use through the different generations in different roles, because they're the trusted ones that can be relied upon to continue these agendas, rather than taking a chance with newcomers who don't have those kind of loyalties and those family links in place. Sherry Blair, the wife of the mass-murdering war criminal Tony Blair, would you believe it, when you delve into her ancestry, turns out to be descended from John Wilkes Booth. Her maiden name was Sherry Booth. And again, the mainstream newspapers have embraced this. You can read about it in the Daily Mail. They make no bones about it. She is a descendant of the guy that is said to have assassinated Abraham Lincoln, if that's what really happened. What are the chances that several generations later, somebody that comes from that bloodline would just happen to crop up as the wife of the British leader? And these mainstream sources that talk about this kind of thing, they, in all seriousness, imply that it's just a coincidence. They say, who'd have believed it? Isn't it crazy? You know, this just happens to be the case. And they make no attempt to join the dots and see patterns and see a trend emerging here. They present it to the public as just one of those wild coincidences at odds of billions to one. But they happen all the time, it seems. Another one, according to a number of researchers, including the New Zealander Greg Hallett, whose work is definitely worth having a look at, he claims that Bill Clinton was actually an illegitimate child of Winston Churchill and Pamela Harriman. And there's a few aspects of that do seem to check out, because Winston Churchill's family home is Blenheim Palace, which is a few miles from Oxford, England, where I live. And Bill Clinton attended Oxford University, and there's all kinds of other links, and, the timings just work out for that to be the case. Obviously, it's not proven, but it's another suggestion, and it wouldn't surprise me if it turned out to be the case. So, why am I showing a slide of Arnold Schwarzenegger? Well, we're talking about lifetime actors, and we're talking about how it is that certain individuals get to these prominent positions. Why is it that Arnold Schwarzenegger became such a successful actor and then got ushered into the world of politics over and above all other contenders who might be a bit more intellectually equipped, maybe we could say, for the role? Well, there's got to be a reason for that. And maybe there's a clue when you go way back to his early days of bodybuilding, when he won a competition in the 1960s in London, and he was presented with his trophy by none other than our old mate Jimmy Savile. And note the Masonic handshake that is going on in this picture. This is Bohemian Grove, the notorious gathering ground for the rich and famous and elite, so-called, of this world. And this picture is from 1967. And you have, over on the right-hand side, Richard Nixon, and on the left, Ronald Reagan. And both these guys went on to become US presidents. As to whether there's any link between that fact and the fact that they were gathered together at Bohemian Grove in 1967, you can use your own imagination. But this certainly appears to be a breeding ground for future highly influential people that are put into the public eye. And again, you can ask yourself how much of their career development is down to hard work and good luck, and how much of it is down to them being placed into these positions by those that can make these things happen. Talking about lifetime actors, some of them really are actors. So we get on to Neil deGrasse Tyson, who is constantly paraded as this brilliant astrophysicist, this guy with an incredible mind, an incredible intellect, who you have to listen to. He's the go-to guy on all such matters. But it turns out he is a bloody actor, and they make no bones about that. He's got an IMDb bloody database detailing all the films that he's been a part of. And I'm not going to get into the whole flat Earth situation in this talk. Some of you might be glad to hear. But when it comes down to the question of whether we live on a flat motionless plane or a spinning ball, Neil deGrasse Tyson's got the answer. He says it's neither. According to him, it's an oblate spheroid, pear-shaped. So it probably looks something like this. We're just round the other side. The British answer to Neil deGrasse Tyson is this guy, Brian Cox. Brian bloody Cox. That's what BBC stands for, because he's all over the BBC. You would think there are no other scientists in the world, there are no other people qualified to comment on issues of astrophysics other than Brian bloody Cox, because he's all over the place. And in an interview quite recently, he made the comment, why wouldn't you want academics to be celebrities? So he's kind of trying to justify why it is that he's the go-to guy each and every time at the expense of all others. Lifetime actors with military backgrounds, Tim Peake. Who really believes Tim Peake is genuinely up in the International Space Station when we have this footage presented to us by NASA? Well, here are some interesting images. Here's one that's been leaked of Tim Peake in front of a classic green screen where the background detail is stripped in at a later phase. And that appears to be what's going on here with all this background detail of the so-called International Space Station, which we're told he's up in. And a very interesting story came out, I think it was last year, where there was a picture from NASA HQ in Houston. And Bush Sr., George H.W. Bush, is being wheeled around this facility for a tour. And in the background, you can see on a screen Tim Peake in a green screen film setting before the background detail has been painted in, pretending to be up in space. And I don't know how this picture got leaked, whether it was deliberately put out there or whether we weren't supposed to see it. But either way, it seems to be quite revealing in terms of letting us know what's really going on there. One big hoax, one big lie involving actors. And you can throw Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong and all the rest of the so-called Apollo astronauts into the same picture, I feel. Your wife's on the phone, what do you want for dinner tonight? Grab a Chinese on the way home from the film set. Talking of brilliant minds and astrophysicists, another go-to guy over the decades has been Stephen Hawking. Or is it? So if you look at this composite of pictures, the official story is that these are all pictures of the same guy. Don't know about you, but to me, it appears that there's at least two, probably more individuals there. These are not pictures of the same guy. Stephen Hawking was diagnosed with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, in 1963. And according to medical experts, most people die of that unfortunate condition within a few years. Some of them go on for about 20-odd years. That's been the maximum amount of time that's been put on it from diagnosis, 20-odd years. So we're supposed to believe that this guy has lived with this condition for the past 54 years. It seems far more likely to me that the real Stephen Hawking died decades ago. And what we've been looking at all these years is a series of actors taking his place. And what an ingenious situation when we're told that the guy can't speak. So anything he communicates has to be done by way of an electronic voice box. And when you have that, you can literally be putting words into his mouth and have him say anything you choose for him to say. And of course, when the voice box goes wrong, we have a few problems from time to time. But I would certainly ask people to consider whether we're looking at the genuine Stephen Hawking or whether this is another massive mind control psyop hoax being foisted upon the people. We also get lifetime actors in the truth movement, so-called. And every now and again, you get the odd name that gets exposed and revealed to have been a plant and some kind of agent all along. I mentioned earlier that you get these accusations with pretty much every researcher on the scene. So you certainly can't take seriously every accusation that you hear. But every now and again, you get evidence to prove beyond any doubt that what you've been looking at is an actor that has been playing this particular role to steer people's attention off in a particular direction. This guy is Charlie Veitch. And for many years in the UK, he was the front of this organisation that he called the Love Police. And he positioned himself as an activist. He would turn up outside corporate HQs and government buildings, and he would bellow through a bullhorn and, seemingly get arrested every couple of minutes and just generally make a pain in the arse of himself to the establishment. And so many people, well-meaning, trusted him, believed that he was genuine, followed his work, and went along with everything that he said. A few years ago, the BBC screened a documentary called 9/11 Road Trip. I think it was on the 10th anniversary of that event, actually. And the intention was to reinforce the official story of 9/11, 10 years later, in the minds of the general public, and to show that despite all the conspiracy theories to the contrary, the official story is still true. It was Muhammad Atta and his mates with box cutters. End of story. And what they did is they got 4 so-called conspiracy theorists self-proclaimed, on this show. And they put them together with people like firefighters, architects, engineers, first responders, experts on aviation. And they tried to convince them that the official narrative of 9/11 was the correct one after all. And surprise, surprise, what do you know? All of these people that started off as skeptics, by the end of the show, had all changed their mind. And they'd all come out and said, yes, I can see it now. 9/11 was done by 19 Arabs with box cutters, just as we were told. And Charlie Veitch was one of these people. He did an absolute flip-flop, an absolute 180-degree about turn. Many people felt betrayed because they trusted him. And here he was, being paraded on this BBC show, having totally changed his mind on the whole thing. There's this one hilarious scene where, in all seriousness, he's got a couple of towers of Lego bricks. And it's being explained to him how the impact of the planes caused the buildings to crumble. And he's got these Lego bricks, and he's going, of course, now I can see it. How stupid I've been, now I understand. But of course, the truth of the matter is he was an actor all along. He was sent in to infiltrate the scene, to sow confusion and mistrust among those in the truth community. And there you are, that's his true colours. It turns out that when you look at his online profiles as well, he makes no secret of the fact that he is indeed an actor. Here his profile lists him as a model, actor, film and stage crew. As Johnny Rotten said in the Sex Pistols' final concert in 1978, do you ever get the feeling you've been cheated? Actors, yes, we have crisis actors as well, of course. Dear old Gene Rosen of Sandy Hook fame. Here he is rehearsing his lines. And we couldn't really do this conversation without bringing up Paul McCartney, could we? Or should that be Paul McCartney? Yes, we have to get it into every talk. You know, sometimes I find it's easier to explain the truth of a situation by describing what it isn't rather than what it is, when you state it in the apophatic sense. So with 9/11, for example, all kinds of theories about how it was done. Was it directed energy weapons? Were the planes holograms? Etc. You could tie yourself up for days trying to make sense of which version of the story stacks up. But one thing you can be sure of, despite what Charlie Veitch might tell you, is that the official version presented to us by the mainstream media and by the government is a crock of crap from start to finish. It makes no sense whatsoever. You can throw it out and start again with a blank sheet of paper. So we know what didn't happen. What didn't happen is the official version of events. We get on to Paul McCartney. All kinds of theories. Did the real Paul McCartney die in 1966? And was he replaced by an individual that's been taking his place ever since? Very difficult to prove, but there's a whole load of evidence and clues and suggestions and symbolic pointers to suggest that might be the case. But one thing that I can say with absolute certainty is that the guy that is presented to us today as Paul McCartney is not the real biological James Paul McCartney. The guy on the left is the real Paul. The guy on the right, who knows? The most common theory is that he's a guy by the name of William Shepherd, a.k.a. Billy Shears, and that he was presented to the world on the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper album in 1967, where they come out with the line, "So may I introduce to you the one and only Billy Shears." They were putting it in plain sight and telling you that this is the new guy that is replacing Paul. There's a book that came out in 2009 on the 9th of the 9th, 09, interestingly, which if you flip it round and do an inversion on it becomes 666, which is a very important number in this whole story of what goes on in the music industry. It was called The Memoirs of Billy Shears, and it purports to be the autobiography of this guy, William Shepherd, who took the place of Paul McCartney when he died in 1966. And the book is him spilling the beans on how it was done. So the book is presented as a work of historical fiction. So there's plausible deniability there. So if ever anyone tried to launch any kind of legal action against this individual for impersonating a dead man, they could claim, well, no, we told you it was a work of fiction, So it's just, imagination. What they actually say is that it's a mixture of fact and a small amount of fictional embellishment. So nobody really knows which parts are fiction and which parts are reality. But it's the best clue we have, I feel, to let us know what really happened with the original Paul McCartney. But it becomes more convoluted than that. And for quite some time, I went along with the idea that the original Paul McCartney was replaced by a single individual, this guy Billy Shears, and that's been the case for the last 50 years. Good friend of mine, Mike Williams, a.k.a. Sage of Quay, I've done a couple of radio shows with him on this subject, and he's done a whole load of interviews based around the book, The Memoirs of Billy Shears. He's put together these composite pictures of the various Paul McCartneys that we've had over the years. So have a look at these and ask yourself whether you think these are all pictures of the same individual or even two different people. We're back to the same thing with Stephen Hawking. So here's another one. And you look at any one of these pictures in isolation, or you present it to the average person in the street, and you could say, who is this? They'll say, well, it's Paul McCartney. But then you give them another picture side by side, and suddenly they'll be able to see the anomalies and the discrepancies between these different renderings of him. So I'm now left with the absolutely mind-fucking idea that we might be dealing with more than one replacement. And so when it comes to this idea of actors playing roles in the public eye, it really does go very deep. And it may well be that there's more than one individual that has played the role of Paul McCartney over the years. And we're left in these latter years with this individual, whoever he may be. Human rights activist meets individual with investments in depleted uranium. So often, these people are presented to us as philanthropists and doing great work. That's one of the reasons they get in the public eye. David Rockefeller, I'm sure we're all very sad at the news of his passing the other week, was presented as a philanthropist. He cared. He cared about people. He just wanted to help. That's why he launched his healthcare system. That's why he got into the education system. He just wanted to help. And so many of these people do. Jimmy Savile did a lot of great work for charity. Very charitable guy. Of course, the truth of the matter is Jimmy Savile did a lot of work for charity because it got him close to kids. He volunteered to work in hospitals with spinal injuries units where there were kids that couldn't move. They were bedridden. And because he was doing charity work, he had an excuse to get close to them. So philanthropy is often used as an excuse for getting these people into the public eye. And just before we move on, here's Paul McCartney, or whoever it may be, giving us the Masonic hush sign and reminding us about the oaths of allegiance that these people take to the secret societies that they belong to. There was a very interesting sketch on a TV show by the British illusionist Derren Brown a few years ago pertaining to this whole Paul is dead idea. And I feel it's worth mentioning here because it's certainly something to ponder on. So in this sketch, he's in London and he's got a map and he's stopping passers-by and he's asking for directions to different parts of town. And so these people look down at the map and they try and help him to show where he needs to go. And while they're looking at the map, he has 3 colleagues that walk past with a great big painting. They're all carrying a painting and they're stood behind it. And they say, excuse me, coming through. And while the person doesn't notice, Derren Brown jumps behind the painting. And one of the guys that was holding it takes his place and jumps out with a map. And so when the person looks up, it's no longer Derren Brown that they're speaking to, but he's been replaced. And he does it with 3 or 4 different people. And they don't notice that they're no longer talking to Derren Brown. And in the last version of it, he changes place with a woman. And the person doesn't even notice. And it just shows you how easily you can be fooled when your conscious mind is not engaged, when you're not applying critical thought, when you're going by automatic pilot, and you're really not concentrating on the situation. You can be duped so easily. And all manner of deceptions can be placed right in front of your eyes. And until it's pointed out to you, you don't realize what's gone on. Two more things to mention about this sketch. One of the places that he asks directions to in London is St. Paul's Cathedral. And at the end of the sketch, he says, I'm sure that wouldn't have gone so well if I was, let's say, a world-leading pop star. Seems to me that there was knowledge on the part of Derren Brown of this whole Paul McCartney replacement thing, and he's very slyly putting it into plain sight on this TV show in the knowledge that it will go right over the heads of about 99% of the people watching it, unless it's pointed out to them. As the Beatles said on Strawberry Fields, living is easy with eyes closed, misunderstanding all you see. Ain't that the truth? Facilitated careers. This is another aspect of this whole thing. It goes back to this idea that we get given that you too could be the next big pop star. All you got to do is play a few gigs, write some good songs, work really hard, go to a few parties, do some networking, and you could be the next Beatles. Doesn't work like that. Here's how it works. 3 ways to facilitated careers put into place by those who are able to make these things happen. Because ultimately, those who run the corporate music industry, those who run the Hollywood movie industry, those that run all the big business, the world of science, of academia, of government, they're all ultimately connected via the same networks and secret societies. That's how they can make all these things happen. So the first way, as we've discussed, is via your bloodline or your genetics. It's all down to the family that you come from. And there's another aspect of that, which is tied into the world of military intelligence. We'll get onto that shortly as well. And the third way that you can make it through the ranks is elevation granted to selected chosen ones. This is how I feel it's being done in certain cases. They identify people with specific skills and talents, and they realize that they could be of great use to them in furthering some social engineering agenda or other if they're co-opted into it. And so they're made offers that they can't refuse, glittering contracts. We'll get on to a couple of examples of that as well. So as well as Hollywood actors and pop stars and politicians, we also have business leaders that everyone's heard of, household names, like Bill Gates. So we're led to believe that Bill Gates is the founder of Microsoft. Of course he is. He's this nerdy computer geek, and he invented this corporation, and it just happened to get really, really successful. And now he's a billionaire. But the truth of the matter is that Bill Gates does a lot of work in conjunction with the United Nations, their New World Order agenda, Agenda 2030, all about population reduction. A big part of it is eugenics, and he is the son of a very well-known eugenicist. So Bill Gates seems to spend most of his time these days in Africa rolling out enforced vaccination programs to children down there because he cares. He just wants to help. Bill Gates' father was, as I said, a eugenicist and a part of the Planned Parenthood organization associated with the Rockefeller Foundation. Here's the founder of Planned Parenthood. This is the mindset and the ideology of that organization. One of the many outrageous things that she said was the most merciful thing that a large family does to one of its infant members is to kill it. There's other quotes where she compares the children of regular working class folk, the general herd, to animals that deserve to be culled. This is the mindset of these psychopathic individuals. Mark Zuckerberg. Anyone really believe Mark Zuckerberg was this nerdy college dork that came up with this amazing idea of Facebook in his college dorm one night? Or is it far more likely that this organization is a product of the CIA and NSA for spying and surveillance means? Russell Tavistock Brand came out a few years ago claiming we need a revolution of consciousness, just happened to be Katy Perry's mind control handler. But don't worry, it's just a coincidence. So many red flags with Russell Brand, and yet people were still buying his act. And people that should know better, people that claim to be truth seekers, were embracing Russell Brand when he started to appear on these BBC news shows a few years ago, talking about we need to level the playing field and we need to redistribute the wealth in society and stuff, basically espousing Marxism and communism. But, there's a couple of other warning signs as well. He's on BBC Newsnight, BBC Question Time. Who gets to go on these programs? You don't just get anyone on those panels. They're carefully selected, and they're there for a reason. And there's Russell Brand with all the warning signs that you could want, and people still don't get it. Russell Brand's People's Revolutionary Role was gone. The music industry and so-called hip-hop, which is a genre that I've concentrated on big time in the book that I've written, and there's much more to come in Volume 2 as well. Lil Wayne is out there touted as the biggest thing in hip-hop right now, has been for quite a few years. You speak to any bona fide old-school hip-hop head that understands what that art form and that culture is all about, they'll have nothing to do with Lil Wayne. They see his music as absolute toxic garbage. He's a complete joker, a complete clown who has worked to debase and degrade the very fibre of that particular art form. And it's all been done according to an agenda. And as he says, his music is shit, but he gets paid a hell of a lot to do it. And he's probably mind-controlled into the role as well. Then we have Lady Gaga, who came out, I think it was last year, in an interview, talking about how she'd woken up to the true nature of the industry and what's going on in the world, and she wasn't going to be a puppet anymore. She's fed up with being told what to do, fed up with being told what to sing. From now on, she's making her own statements. She's her own creative artist. And the following year, she performed at the US Super Bowl halftime show on a stage absolutely replete with Masonic, occultic, esoteric, Egyptian imagery. Far more disturbing than that, though, for Puppet No More Lady Gaga, was this song Pizza, which came out a few weeks ago, right in the midst of all the Pizzagate allegations of a massive institutionalized paedophile ring involved in child trafficking coming out of Washington, D.C., and involving some very high-up names. So right in the midst of alternative researchers delving into this whole thing and trying to expose what was going on, Lady Gaga comes out with a song called Pizza. I've included a few lyrics for you here, for your interest. No need to read them out loud, but I think you get the gist. She's a puppet no more, you know. She's not being told what to do anymore. So you could just leave it there, and if you're a coincidence theorist, you could say, well, she just wanted to make a song called Pizza, I guess. But she's not the only one, because Katy Perry came out with this promotional picture just a few weeks ago where she just happens to be eating a slice of pizza. And I've got to say, I'm very much looking forward to what Jim Fetzer has to say about the whole Pizzagate thing. I know that's going to be the subject of his talk tomorrow evening. Then we get Beyonce in a picture serving up a plate of pizza. We get Rihanna in a massive pizza dress. And we get Justin Bieber and Miley Cyrus pictured eating a slice of pizza. So what are the chances that all these artists just happen to feel the need to be pictured eating slices of pizza all around the same time, if it's not for the fact that they're blatantly mocking the general public and taking the piss and rubbing our noses in it, because they know that independent researchers are all over this Pizzagate thing. Meanwhile, they're parading their goons in pictures like this just to absolutely rub our noses in it, knowing that the vast majority of the public not only have never heard of Pizzagate and have no idea what it is, but if you tried to explain that's what's going on in these pictures, they would just tell you that you're crazy. End of conversation. At least this picture puts paid to the popular rumour that Miley Cyrus and Justin Bieber are in fact the same person. So we've established that's not the case. But seriously though, talk about taking the piss. And here's Noel Gallagher, you know, man of the people, right on, rebellious, rocker, sipping champagne at number 10 with Tony back in the day. None of these individuals, particularly when it comes to rock stars, are who you think they are. It's a very uncomfortable truth for people to come to terms with. But when you do the research, the conclusions become inevitable. When it comes to celebrities put together as couples, celebrity couples like Kim and Kanye, it's my personal view that these are arranged relationships. I don't believe that these people fall madly in love over drinks one night in a bar and they go for walks in the park, kicking the leaves around in the autumn and look into each other's eyes and fall madly in love. I think it's far more the case that their handlers instruct them to enter into these relationships. And I know you could make the case that if you are a celebrity like Kanye West and you move in those circles, you're not going to go out with a toilet cleaner or a bus driver. You're going to keep it within those industries. But there are so many of them, and there are so many warning signs as well. Jay-Z and Beyonce, are they a natural couple, romantically linked, or was that whole thing made to happen? And Jay-Z is probably a bit upset about the news of his old mate Dave Rockefeller, given that he named his record company after him, Rockefeller Records. He's probably a bit lost now, bless him. Rock stars and military backgrounds, the work of the brilliant Dave McGowan, author and researcher, no longer with us, sadly. So much great work that he put into this book, Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, and he's inspired a whole new genre of research. All the stuff that Jan Irvin and Joe Atwill are doing, all the stuff that this guy called Nino 210, who's doing research into the punk and new wave scene, are doing. A lot of the work that I'm doing were inspired by the work of Dave McGowan, where he revealed these military background links to many of these prominent musicians. So the classic one is Jim Morrison of The Doors. His father, as most people have probably heard by now, was Admiral George Stephen Morrison, in charge of the fleet of ships involved in the Gulf of Tonkin incident that basically started the Vietnam War. There he is. And I'm actually going to Laurel Canyon on Monday on a very quick research visit. I've got a tour of all these hotspots that these musicians in the hippie counterculture scene were hanging out in, like the Log Cabin, Frank Zappa's old place, and the Lookout Mountain military base. Really looking forward to seeing Laurel Canyon on Tuesday. Then you have Miles Copeland, big-time career CIA guy. He had 3 sons. They were all put to use in the music industry. They all had highly influential companies. One was called Frontier Booking International, FBI. One of them was called Copeland International Artists, CIA. And the other one was Stuart Copeland, who was in the police with Sting. What's a sting operation? Loads of research going into my next book, into the punk and new wave scene, and these same links back into military intelligence and expressions of the establishment. Just a couple of really quick ones. Tina Weymouth, who is a member of Talking Heads and Tom Tom Club. This guy, Nino 210, who's guested on a couple of radio shows with me, has uncovered through his research that his brother was the chief of design for the Grand Louvre project in Paris, including the placement of the iconic glass pyramid. Their father, Ralph Weymouth, Vice Admiral of the US Navy, and there's links there to Yale University, Skull and Bones, JP Morgan, Astor Place Bank, and the Federal Reserve System, and the 1910 meeting at Jekyll Island. But it's all just a coincidence, don't worry. Dave Grohl of the Foo Fighters. His father worked as an assistant to Robert A. Taft Jr. His father was William Howard Taft, President of the US. His father, in turn, Alfonso Taft, was a founder of Skull and Bones. Extracurricular activities. I might have to breeze through this quite quickly. What you often get is celebrities who are thought of as one thing. So Bono thought of as a rock singer, among other things. Olivia Wilde as a Hollywood actress, and Richard Branson as an entrepreneur, being ushered into other kind of public roles. So there was this commercial that these 3 did the other year for a campaign called Toilet Strike, which is supposed to be all about bringing fresh water to impoverished people in Africa. And they were wheeled out as the public face of it. You had, during Hillary's campaign last year, Snoop Dogg, of all people, doing an interview saying, I think it's time for America to have a female president. I want equality for women. Snoop Dogg brought us the songs To All My Niggers and My Bitches and G's Up, Hose Down, just in case you forget. Bono pushing the transgender agenda, which is picking up big time now. There's this article about him where he's been voted Woman of the Year because it's all about blurring the lines between gender, and it's all about equality. I did a talk in Ireland the other week, actually, where I couldn't resist showing this slide, and I didn't get any objections. Russell Brand will raise his child gender neutral. Transgender agenda in full effect. Bob Geldof wheeled out as the public face of smart meters. Get a smart meter, everyone, says Bob. Because, washed up old has-been rock singers are just the kind of people to tell you to get a smart meter, really. Received Man of Peace Award, worked in an abattoir. He's all heart, he cares. Culture creation. So the same thing as with individuals that are put there in the public eye. The same time as you get any kind of fad, trend, movement, something that everyone is doing. If everyone's doing it, it's been created. It's been made to happen because these things don't evolve organically. It was the case with feminism, the whole feminist movement, women's liberation, Gloria Steinem as the figurehead for that. Turns out to have worked with the CIA. That whole movement was all about getting women out of the family home, away from their kids, so that the kids spend more time in childcare facilities, in schools, and then women contribute to the taxation system, that many more taxes collected. That's what that was really all about. Dr. Timothy Leary, touted as the acid guru, this groovy Harvard professor that wanted everyone to explore these journeys of consciousness with LSD, turns out to have been a CIA asset. The Grateful Dead, heroes of that whole hippie counterculture scene, big-time links to the CIA. The road manager of the Grateful Dead was Alan Trist for some time. His father was Eric Trist, who is one of the founders of the Tavistock Institute in London, but it's just a coincidence. We got the 50th anniversary this year of the Human Being in San Francisco and the Monterey Pop Festival, which were all very instrumental in getting this whole counterculture scene firmly sewn into the minds of the general public, all about LSD, all about psychedelic rock music, all about changing morals, changing people's ideas of what's morally acceptable behavior. And we've seen how that's played out over the decades since. This is a very revealing document. It's all about methods of subverting a population which came out of the Soviet Union during the Cold War years. And number 4 on this agenda, this list of ways to infiltrate a culture and have an effect on it in a very covert manner, involves false heroes and role models, addictive fads, mass. It's actually part of a political agenda because they realize that when you do it through popular culture, you're creeping up on people like a mugger in a dark alley, and they don't see it coming. And even when you explain it to most people, they're not having it because they want to believe that their heroes are who they think they are. And they want to believe that when they do things like the Ice Bucket Challenge, they're making an individual personal statement. Whereas, in fact, most people were doing this ridiculous thing just because they saw their favorite celebrities doing it. So anytime something becomes a mass fad and a trend, and an expression of that we're seeing right now is this very rapid march towards a transhumanist society, a smart grid, futurist reality where everything is linked to computers, everything is digital, everything is electronic, and how that's been moved on in great strides over the past few years. And people have done exactly what they were predicted to do. They've embraced the technology. They've seen it as cool. They've seen it as trendy. They've seen it as something they have to be a part of. And they've absolutely fallen into the hands of the social engineers. And unless people get wise to what's going on, because now we have smart grids everywhere, we have smart meters. In the UK, we've got smart motorways, we've got smart cities. It's Wi-Fi signals communicating and spying and surveilling everything that we do. If nothing happens to stop this in its strides, then the world that our kids are going to have to grow up in is an absolute nightmare straight out of one part 1984, one part Brave New World. So what do we do about it? It can be very difficult to find the solutions sometimes and to know how we combat this. But in all cases, we have the opportunity to know what's being done. This is the tenet of placing the truth in plain sight. So we have all these individuals giving us their little hand signals, letting us know what they're really a part of, for those that have the eyes to see and have been vigilant enough to do the research and find out what all these things are. These are indications of membership to these secret societies, where you see the 666 sign, the one eye, and all the rest of it. And yes, he's no different. Showing his true colours. Not that he hasn't done that this week anyway, but in case there was any doubt. So it's all about, it has to be, engaging large numbers of people in truth. And each of us taking on the responsibility to do our part in conveying truthful information. Because until large numbers of people, not the mass of the population by any stretch of the imagination, it's a certain quantum critical mass of people that it's going to take to really turn things around. But we're nowhere near that number yet. So until it's reached, the job remains communicating this information in whatever way we can and trying to get other people to break the illusion, break the mind control, break the spell, acknowledge that they've been had. There's no shame in acknowledging that you've been duped. I've been duped big time in my life. And when I discovered that it's happened, I resolved to never let it happen again. And we need other people to do that as well. We can often feel disempowered. We can feel our own individual contributions won't make any change at all. But if you have 1 million people all sitting around thinking, what can I do? It's not worth me even trying. Then that's 1 million people that could otherwise have been engaged together, pooling their consciousness, pooling their good intent to try and turn the situation around. So that remains the responsibility of those of us that have seen through the veil of lies and illusion. And that's what we have to do. Aleister Crowley, the notorious occultist, in his book of magic, stated that magic with a K is the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. These occultists understand the nature of reality. They understand that by applying your will and your intent to a desired outcome, you can help that to physically manifest. This dynamic doesn't have to be the domain of dark occultists and Luciferians and Satanists. It's available to any of us if we choose to apply ourselves to it. It can work in our favor as well as against us. That remains the work that we all have to do. Thank you for listening.